This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Susie Garrett. Brought to you by...
Sailing through the heart of historic cities and landscapes on a river, you get close to iconic landmarks, to local life, to cultural treasures. Viking River Cruises, exploring the world in comfort.
Record territory. Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke sparks a rally that pushes stocks to all-time highs. So where are the best opportunities now?
Pain at the pump. When you pull up to fill up, don't be surprised if you have to pay up. Gas prices are rising and predicted to go higher, but for how long?
And ripoff from a multi-million-dollar house to the big house. We have the story of a woman who defrauded taxpayers like you in a Medicare scheme so brazen, it's hard to believe. All that and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Thursday, July 11th.
Good evening, everyone. A day of milestones on Wall Street today. Stocks surged and the major averages hit new records thanks to a broad-based rally. All 10 of the S&P 500 sectors were up. So what happened? Well, call it the Ben Bernanke rally. Investors were inspired to buy stocks this morning following news we told you about last night, the Fed chairman saying the central bank will continue its easy money policies. Why? Because Bernanke said the weak U.S. economy still needs help. The buying was explosive. The Dow soared 170 points, closing at 15,460. This is a new record high. The Nasdaq jumped 57 points to a 13-year high, and the S&P closed at the new record of 1675, up 22 points. Even the small-cap Russell 2000 index stands in record territory tonight. And the buying carried over to the bond market and gold. The 10-year Treasury rose with the yield down now to 2.57%. And gold prices also on the rise, up $32.50 to $1,279.
And joining us now to talk more about today's market activity and what may be ahead is Bob Dahl, Chief Equity Strategist at Nuveen Asset Management. Bob, good evening. Good to have you with us. So my question for you to kick it off is, did Bernanke really say anything yesterday that was all that different from what he's been saying for weeks? And if he didn't, what sparked the rally?
Yeah, not a whole lot different, Tyler. I think the emphasis and maybe our listening and interpretation was a little bit different. I think the world largely felt when he made his speech a couple of weeks ago that he was signaling that we were going to start going the other direction. And in fact, he was, but he kept saying if the economy's strong enough. And I think last night he said the economy clearly isn't quite strong enough, so we're there with all the guns to help.
So, Bob, who should investors be really listening to? Fed Chairman Bernanke or all of the CEOs that are parading out talking about the outlook for their businesses and their earnings over the next couple of months? Which is more important, the Fed or earnings?
It's a great question, Susie. I think we're in a transition. That is to say, the Fed's almost finished its work. That is, the PE, or the valuation improvement in the stock market, has been a wonderful thing. Pretty soon, it's going to depend on earnings, and corporate CEOs are delivering mixed messages. On the whole, positive, but not all of them and not big magnitude. So we have to watch these next earnings releases very carefully, which will be fast and furious over the next few weeks.
Do you expect that the earnings picture is going to be reasonably good as we really get into the torrent of them, beginning tomorrow with J.P. Morgan and Wells Fargo in the banking sector? And then as you look out, Bob, beyond this past quarter into the second half of this year and 2014, do you think there's going to be more earnings momentum or a continued slog?
I feel a lot better about the second half of this year and into next year in terms of earnings improvement, high single-digit earnings gains. The quarter that we're about to report could be sloppy again, particularly, Tyler, at the revenue level. Remember, revenue gains in the first quarter left something to be desired, and we may have another quarter of that sloppiness, which is part of the reason I think the stock market may back and fill before it moves substantially higher.
You know, we all get excited when we see the stock market going up and hitting new records, but the individual investor has really stayed out of the picture, as you well know, and we've been reporting a lot on it. Wondering what your take is on this Wall Street Journal op-ed piece by the CEO and founder of Schwab. The title is Why Individual Investors Are Fleeing Stocks. Are there ways to fix things so that the individual comes back in? They say that it's really important that nobody benefits if the individual investor does not participate in the markets. What do you think, Bob?
Well, Susie, we need the individual investor. There's no question about it. And in some ways, the individual investor participates in other ways, retirement plans and the like, maybe not buying, selling those stocks themselves. A lot of individuals feel that they can't compete with the muscle of the professional in the market, if you will. My view is there is some element of truth to that, but on the other hand, in the old days, it was all about who got the information the fastest. Now everybody gets the information at the same time. So if I were an individual and not, quote, a professional, I wouldn't give up, but I'd make sure I relied on financial advisors and some products that can help me get there as opposed to having to do all the work myself.
All right, Bob Dahl, always good to see you. Bob is Chief Equity Strategist at
Thank you.
Nuveen Asset Management.
One of the biggest gainers in the Dow today, Microsoft, the same day it announced a major reorganization. As the world's biggest software maker struggles in a world of tablets and smartphones that don't use its operating system, the company is shaking things up and refocusing efforts. John Fort explains.
Times are changing in the PC business, and Microsoft is trying to change too. CEO Steve Ballmer today announcing a highly anticipated restructuring that he hopes will have the company behaving less like a collection of warring fiefdoms. We are rallying behind a single strategy as one company, he wrote, not a collection of divisional strategies. The new structure? It'll have 4 main engineering divisions: operating systems, apps, cloud, and devices. But the new divisions won't have their own marketing, finance departments, and P&Ls.
I don't believe it's going to have a dramatic impact in the near term, but it's a needed realignment. They have to shake the tree.
It's been 11 years since Microsoft had a restructuring this deep. That's when Microsoft first organized into business units. The mobile and cloud revolutions brought about by the iPhone and Amazon, they're a big reason why Microsoft's under pressure now. The PC market isn't keeping up. Research firms IDC and Gartner said that in Q2, shipments dropped 11%, which means that Microsoft needs to look for growth in other areas. Nokia, which uses Microsoft software in its phones, unveiled its new Lumia 1020 today, and the CEO seemed as sure as ever that he picked the right partner.
Being the player with Windows Phone in partnership with Microsoft to combat Samsung, to combat Apple, feels like a good place. Because if you take a look at the Android market right now and the other players in the Android market environment, it's a tough slog.
Well, how will we really know whether Microsoft is making the right moves? In about a year and a half, we'll start to see products that were developed under this new structure. If they're mind-blowing and push Microsoft ahead, Steve Ballmer will look like a genius. If not, some investors are bound to start asking who will be the next Microsoft CEO to try to make big changes. For Nightly Business Report, I'm John Fort.
The sharp rise in sales of tablets and smartphones comes at the expense of the old-fashioned desktop computer. The research firm Gartner reports worldwide shipments of personal computers fell for the 5th quarter in a row, down 11% in the April through June period.
Just as PC sales take a serious slide, China's Lenovo has now unseated Hewlett-Packard to become the world's #1 PC maker. Lenovo, which bought IBM's personal computer business back in 2005, now controls nearly 17% of the world's PC market. Hewlett-Packard slipped to 2nd place.
Ford is cutting the price of its all-electric 2014 Focus sedan by 10%, about $4,000 off the sticker price for this year's new model. The automaker wants to make sure that prices are competitive when the Focus Electric hits dealer showrooms in the next few weeks, going up against comparably sized plug-ins from rivals GM and Nissan.
Well, you don't need an electric car to know that oil prices have been soaring. So it's only a matter of time before those crude costs trickle down to what we all pay at the pump. And as Hampton Pearson reports, you might see big price hikes as early as this weekend.
Paying at the pump is coming back with a vengeance. Gasoline up 9 cents a gallon in some parts of the country just in the last few days, and could be up 20 cents in the next 2 weeks. Motorists nationwide feel blindsided. In New Jersey,
it would suck. It would make everything more uncomfortable.
It's going to cut down the amount of driving I do.
In Washington, D.C.,
I'm probably blowing through $200 a month, $250 a month in gas.
You'll have to pay it, but it'll be home, work, grocery store, that's it.
And in California, where gasoline prices are already hovering around $4 a gallon, and motorists pay the highest gasoline taxes in the country, 72 cents a gallon.
They're just milking us for everything that they can because they can.
Nationwide, gasoline prices have been on a roller coaster, averaging $3.63 a gallon a month ago before falling to $3.47 currently, according to AAA. The coming price spike is creating a not-so-perfect storm for consumers just as the summer driving season moves into high gear.
They're going to get some sticker shock over the next couple of weeks. I think you'll see the impact really after the summer. I don't expect anyone to change their vacation plans now.
Crude oil futures trading above $105 a barrel on the NYMEX is translating to big increases in the retail gasoline spot market. Not good news for a still fragile economy, especially consumers.
Households have benefited by about $15 billion over the last year relative to where gasoline prices normally are. So we have a little bit of a gasoline tailwind. But of course that could change if oil prices continue to move higher.
Analysts say the price spike may be temporary. Refineries are producing more gasoline than in the past 6 years, but demand is higher than a year ago. It is, after all, the summer driving season. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Hampton Pearson in Washington.
From the roads to the skies, where more flights are running late, on-time ratings for the nation's biggest airlines fell again during May. The Department of Transportation reports that only about 79% of domestic flights arrived on time during the month of May. That was down from a year ago. Hawaiian Airlines, often the top seater, was the most likely to arrive on time, while American Eagle was the carrier most likely to make you late.
Here's something you don't see too often, a federal budget surplus, at least for the month of June. The U.S. government posted a $117 billion budget surplus last month, and that's thanks to rising tax revenues and public spending cuts in the sequester legislation and some big payments coming into the Treasury from the bailed-out mortgage giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
A bipartisan group of senators wants to break up the nation's biggest banks, saying they've only gotten bigger, more powerful, and take more risks since the financial crisis. A new bill is aimed at separating traditional banking and lending from riskier Wall Street services like investment banking, insurance, swaps, hedge fund operations. The sponsors of the bill include Republican Senator John McCain, Democratic Senators Elizabeth Warren and Maria Cantwell, and the independent Angus King. Still ahead, another big city spurns Wall Street. Will the world's largest retailer ever get a foothold on the lucrative downtown urban market? But first, how the international markets close today.
Good news that some of the nation's biggest retailers' cash registers were ringing more than usual in the month of June. Some big chains, including Costco and Victoria's Secret, reported their strongest sales gains since January, with revenues up almost 4% from the same period last year. Soaring temperatures and an improving economy and summer discounts encouraged more shoppers to spend more money.
Meantime, Walmart says it is dropping some big expansion plans in Washington, D.C. after city leaders passed a so-called living wage measure for employees of big box stores in the district. It is the latest setback for the world's largest retailer, struggling to gain a bigger foothold in lucrative urban markets. Our Courtney Reagan has more now.
One of the nation's biggest cities is going head-to-head with the world's largest retailer. Walmart says it's terminating plans for at least 3 D.C. locations if it's forced to pay minimum wage employees 50% more than the current level. The Washington, D.C. City Council passed a living wage bill requiring retailers with more than 75,000 square feet and total company annual sales of over $1 billion to pay a minimum wage of $12.50 an hour, up from the current $8.25 rate. Walmart doesn't currently have any stores in D.C., but has started construction on 3, with 3 more planned. As a result of the City Council's decision, the discount retailer says it will not pursue the 3 locations it has not yet broken ground on, and is reviewing the financial and legal implications on the 3 under construction.
It's about time that Walmart and these large retailers pay their fair share. I mean, we done worked and barely get minimum wage half the time. People have families to take care of.
Walmart feels it's being unfairly targeted, arguing it had planned to bring 1,800 jobs to D.C. The retailer says its wages and benefits meet or exceed those offered by most competitors, and less than 0.5% of its U.S. workforce earns a federal or state minimum wage.
Costco is located here now, and they have no objection to our living wage law. In fact, they are doing very well in grossing revenue here. Home Depot is located in the nation's capital, and they're also doing very well.
It's not law yet. The D.C. mayor still has to sign the bill, and it has to go through a review period. So supporters of Walmart's presence have some time left to lobby the mayor to veto the proposal.
I'm going to request, as his constituent, to definitely veto this bill.
You never should pit one part of the business community against the other.
Other cities, including San Francisco and Santa Fe, have approved across-the-board minimum wage hikes, though this law would be the first to single out big box retailers. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Courtney Reagan.
On a record day in the markets, some stellar gains by individual stocks to tell you about in tonight's Market Focus. We begin with Disney. It was a Dow leader as a J.P. Morgan note called investors' attention to the outlook for the TV and parks divisions, calling them particularly attractive. Disney shares gained more than 2.5%, closing at $66.58, and the stock is up more than 34% year to date. Amazon shares broke through the $300 barrier for the first time ever after an e-commerce data firm reported sales jumped 30% in June compared with year-ago figures. But Amazon shares closed just below $300, gaining 2.5%.
The chipmaker Advanced Micro Devices led the S&P gainers on the strength of two upgrades. AMD's chips now going to be used in new gaming consoles from Microsoft and Sony, expected to be big sellers this holiday season. Bank of America Merrill Lynch raised the stock 2 notches to buy from underperform. Investors traded AMD at 9 times normal volume, driving the price up nearly 12%. The stock closed at $4.45. The biopharma Celgene reports its linchpin cancer drug slowed the progression of multiple myeloma in a trial. Celgene has been looking to broaden the use of this drug to increase sales and says it will now talk with U.S. and European regulators about those test results. Celgene shares gained almost 8%. It closed at $134.92. It's more than double in a year. And J.P. Morgan upgraded Hess Corporation 2 notches to overweight, saying the oil and gas company's sale of assets is going to unlock up to $4 billion in value. Hess shares gained about 3.25% on double the normal volume. The closing price, $70.96.
Growing demand for new phones has sparked a burgeoning market for copycat handsets. And it seems that China, where so many of the gadgets sold in the U.S. are made, is also ground zero for their knockoffs. Eunice Yoon takes a closer look.
This is what the Chinese authorities don't want you to see: open selling of counterfeit goods.
This is not an Apple, so this is 美国的. So it's not an American-made product. So 不是 iPhone. IQ phone.
The iQuone, designed by American, assembled in China. Fakes like the ones at this electronics supermart in Beijing feed the perception in the U.S. that China games the global economic system with counterfeits as well as currency control, subsidies, and industrial espionage. In June, the U.S. pointed a finger at Chinese wind power firm Sinovel, accusing it of stealing trade secrets. Sinovel isn't commenting. China has said it plays by the rules.
Of course, China would like to protect its own businesses, but it's trying to follow international practices. It's not doing beyond WTO rules.
Not everyone agrees. In one prominent case, the WTO ruled against a Chinese government monopoly on processing credit card and bank transactions. But a year later, the industry is still waiting for action. MasterCard started processing Chinese currency, or RMB, card transactions in Hong Kong, but was told to stop by China's central bank, which said the move was illegal.
What we were doing is really in the cross-border space, and it's RMB settlement in Hong Kong. So I don't see how that breaks any rules or laws.
Do you think it's a fair playing field?
Not yet. Not yet. To be perfectly frank, there's this notion that the U.S. is a mature market.
developed market and China's developing, so that there needs to be time for the field to be totally level. I think we can go faster.
For Nightly Business Report, I'm Eunice Yoon in Beijing.
And coming up on the program, the story of a woman who preyed on the elderly and ripped off taxpayers in a bold multi-million-dollar Medicare scheme. But first, here's a look at how some of the most widely held stocks closed today.
It has been estimated that Medicare fraud costs taxpayers $80 billion a year, and some say it's double that. One couple turned that fraud into an art form. In fact, the woman was so good, investigators say she deserves an award, calling her a master of deception. Andrea Day has the story.
The crime beginning in suburbia New York, where the illegal Haitian immigrants owned a small medical supply company, but soon realized they wanted more.
This was one of the most despicable crimes and fraud schemes that I've seen.
They hatched an elaborate scheme, use elderly patients' identities to bill Medicare, but never provide the services. Helene playing the starring role. Special agent in charge, Tom O'Donnell.
If you look the part and you say the right things, you're actually going to get through there.
And she did. Helene boldly walking into dozens of nursing homes, blowing past security and checkpoints, her eyes set on the patient's charts.
She stole face sheets, which contain all the demographic data you would need on a patient to basically steal their identity.
The scene played out with amazing skill. Joe Giambalvo and Scott Lampert are two of the main investigators on the case. They say Helene was unstoppable, making her moves at night and on weekends.
She would hold herself out as a doctor. She dressed well, she drove a big Mercedes. And I think she intimidated some of the people at these homes that she belonged there.
Armed with the stolen patient records, she created fake order forms, even forged doctors' signatures, all to submit claims for gauze, canes, walkers, and expensive creams, billing Medicare thousands of dollars every day, and it was pure profit.
There was overwhelming evidence that there was a massive healthcare fraud scheme going on.
A scheme that went on for 4 years, growing from a home office to a large industrial space with a handful of employees. The couple billing Medicare more than $10 million, raking in $6.5 million, all of it taxpayer money. And they were living large. $2 million for this house in Brookville, Long Island, filled with expensive furniture, luxury cars, handbags, and private school tuition for their daughter. Helene even posing as a doctor at fancy luncheons, making the society pages, and keeping the act going at nursing homes.
No one knew her. Nobody had legitimate business with her.
We sat down with prosecutors from the U.S. Attorney's Office for an exclusive look into the case, and the evidence is stunning. Helene focused on this pricey cream called hydrogel. It's typically used for coma patients, but Helene wrote out so many fake orders, she became one of the nation's leading providers. Just take a look at this. She claims one 85-year-old woman is so riddled with deep wounds, she needs 8 packs of hydrogel. But the nursing home administrator calls the order mind-boggling, saying, quote, "She is a very healthy woman, physically and mentally, and it's ridiculous to think she would have any kind of ulcer." In one case, she ordered boots for a man who clearly didn't need it. In fact, this patient was a double amputee. He had no legs at all. And she didn't stop there. She orders hydrogel for the amputee's knee, thigh, and ankle. Even when she's audited by Medicare, Helene fights back.
Somebody taught her very well because she wrote the right things. So when it goes through our system of being audited, it looked legitimate and it's paid.
Finally, one family takes a close look at their benefit statement, shocked at what they find.
I have no idea what this company's doing, and we never received any of this wound care.
It doesn't take long before investigators move in on Helene's home in Brookville.
She was hiding in a closet. So we pulled her out of the closet, arrested her.
After years of ripping off taxpayers, the defense argues someone else is to blame, someone who occupied Helene's body.
They claim that she had multiple personalities, and one of her personalities committed the fraud, and not Helene Michelle.
The judge didn't buy it. Helene Michelle was convicted and sentenced to 12 years. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Andrea Day.
Helene Michelle's attorney will only say that they are planning an appeal. Medicare has recently made some changes to its system, so now it is much easier for them to catch schemes like this. But investigators say a black market for patients' face sheets, the documents that she stole out of those nursing homes, still exists. And as for her husband, he fled the country right after she was arrested and is currently on the government's list of most wanted.
Amazing story.
An amazing story. It went on to the tune of $6 million in pure profit to them at the expense of the taxpayer and the victims who were in the nursing home.
And she really did play the role. And now in her defense, if they appeal it, no telling of how she's going to convince jurors or the judge. And
one of her many personalities, they
yes,
say.
One of her many.
How about that?
Well, that's Nightly Business Report for us. I'm Susie Garrow. Thanks for watching.
And I'm Tyler Matheson. Thanks for me as well. Have a great Thursday evening, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Nightly Business Report has been brought to you by sailing through the heart of historic cities and landscapes on a river. You get close to iconic landmarks, to local life, to cultural treasures. Viking River Cruises, exploring the world in comfort.
I'm Susie Garrow with a Nightly Business Report news brief. A Ben Bernanke rally on Wall Street today after the Federal Reserve Chairman vowed to continue the central bank's easy money policies because the weak U.S. economy still needs help. Money poured into stocks. The Dow soared 170 points, reaching a new closing high. The Nasdaq jumped 57, and the S&P closed at a new record of 1675, up 22 points. Uncle Sam is seeing green. The U.S. government posted a $117 billion budget surplus in June. Cash registers were ringing a little more than usual in June. Some of the nation's biggest chain stores posted a 4% rise in sales. And China's Lenovo is now the world's biggest PC maker. It's overtaken the legendary Hewlett-Packard for the top spot. Be sure to tune into Nightly Business Report right here on your public television station.